part of our role as internal communicators is to make sure that we understand at a great depth what makes our business tick, and therefore what makes our people tick, and therefore how our communication needs to be.
You're listening to the Communications Business Advisor podcast, the podcast for communications professionals in the corporate world who are committed to advancing their work and our field's reputation as critical business advisors that are not only invited to the decision-making table, but are required there. I'm your host, Tara McDonagh. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Communications Business Advisor podcast. I have a very exciting guest today, Rachel Miller. Rachel, why don't you share with us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those those folks in the audience who have been under a rock and don't know you.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to join you. My name is Rachel. I am the founder of All Things IC. I'm an internal communication consultant, and I'm based over in London in the UK.
And you are also the author of a new book, Internal Communication Strategy.
I am indeed. Yes, very exciting. And thank you to you for your expert view. So I published Internal Communication Strategy, Design, Develop and Transform Your Organizational Communication. It was published by Kogan Page in April 2024. So it's still hot off the press as we're recording, and it's in the hands of internal communicators around the globe to equip them with all things internal comms related, and particularly to help you write that ever elusive internal comms strategy.
Yes. The ever elusive internal comms strategy. Very true. And we'll put some links in the show notes for those of you who are interested in looking for Rachel's book after our conversation. So, Rachel, one thing that struck me when I was perusing through the book was the data points about how many communicators are using internal communication strategy and how many feel like they have authority over making decisions about when and what is communicated. And what was interesting to me is the numbers, I would argue, correlate, where I think it was 45% of them said that they felt like they had authority over when things could be communicated. And it was more than half did not have a comm strategy. I would argue that the concept of not having authority over what is said and when in your organization and not having a comm strategy are intertwined. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've really complicated internal comms strategy. I think we've overthought it, we've overanalyzed it, and it's become a really thorny issue for many internal communicators where they panic about it. And that doesn't need to be the case. I think very often when you're trying to work strategically inside an organization, you need to be tapped into what the business is doing. You need to be able to be an authority inside your organization. I talk a lot about it's our business to know our business. And there's two sides to that coin. That's one, for us as internal communicators, we need to know what we're talking about from a comms perspective. But you also need to really understand the business environment that you're operating in, your leadership structure, your culture, the way that you do business, whether you're curing patients, selling widgets, transporting people, whatever you're doing as an organization. Part of our role as internal communicators is to make sure that we understand at a great depth what makes our business tick, and therefore what makes our people tick, and therefore how our communication needs to be. So if you're not involved in those decisions and discussions, and you don't have authority around what's communicated, then you're not able to apply your skills and your knowledge and your experience. So your organization misses out, you miss out as an internal communicator, and most importantly, your people miss out, benefiting from your skills and expertise.
I wish people listening could see that I'm giving you a virtual high five right now because like minds unite on this. I call it being a communications business advisor. And it links back to that conversation when you and I were talking about you writing this book, which congratulations, it's no small feat. But you were saying, you're having this existential question. I think it's existential for anybody that's in communications, of defining what is internal communications and what is internal communication strategy. I think I spoke about using the lens of communications to advise the business. It is really about being a business advisor first, knowing your business, and then applying your communication skills, your unique superpowers, to help advance those goals. So this is an area where you and I are 100% aligned. I'm struggling to find a place where we're not aligned.
When we connected last year, I said to you, I feel like you're my virtual twin on the other side of the pond. I think we are very aligned. And I think just in really valuing and nurturing the amazing skills that internal communicators bring. And I think the word strategy itself has become really stressful for many. So in the book, I talk about strategy is your thinking. It's setting your thinking out, and it's articulating how you think as an internal communicator and how you see the world, and therefore how you see your business and how your business needs to be. And I know that you talk a lot about us not being order takers, which I love. So we are totally virtual high five back to you on that one. I totally agree with that. I think that often that situation comes about because internal communicators aren't confident in putting their professional opinion forward, and they hide behind what does everyone else think, and they don't step into, here are my professional recommendations, or here's the insight that I've gathered inside our organization, and that's what's informing my decision. The Institute of Internal Communication talks about the need for us to be evidence-based decision makers. And I love that as a phrase, because if you think about that, then every single conversation you're having, when you're trying to work strategically or trying to demonstrate your thinking, if you're bringing evidence into your decision making, your insights, the sentiment of the organization, what's top of mind, what the rumors are, what's keeping your people awake at night, that insight is so valuable, and it's such a beautiful position for us to be in as internal communicators. The richness and the vibrancy of the conversations we can have when you're trying to get your point of view across. If you're bringing all that evidence in, it helps you make the right decisions. So there is a real robustness and rigor around being a strategic advisor and really owning that role and enjoying it. This is a fantastic field to be in. It's up to you how you work in internal communication. But I think having rigor and having robustness in place sets you up for success.
I agree with that. And I think it's interesting that you brought up confidence, because most of the communications leaders that I speak with will tell me that they feel they're confident. And then when we dig in, as you know, I'm also a strategic comms consultant, and also a coach. And also I have this program, Raise the Tide, for women in our field, women leaders. And what I find is they're confident, but they've been taught to not be confident. And so they've had to sort of fit into this mold of what they should be. And that really challenges them along the way. And I've written recently about feeling like they've been gaslit into thinking what communications should be by people who aren't in the field. And it's regaining that trust in yourself and understanding that you are the expert. No one else knows more about this than you. And also it's just as worthy of every other business area. So,
Absolutely. If I was American, I would be whooping right now, but I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of the time that comes from when you are surrounded by people who think they know how to communicate and they think they know better than you, then it can really knock your confidence. So I think my advice in that situation always is to make sure that you're developing really great relationships inside your organization. And you're not just talking about communication. To be a trusted advisor, anyone can be an advisor. To be a trusted advisor for me is where you are demonstrating your knowledge of the business and you are talking beyond communication. So to be trusted, I wrote in the book about how hierarchy often inhibits honesty, where you can feel nervous about telling a leader, you know what, that town hall wasn't great. You were off message. You didn't look like you believed it. The tone with which you answered the questions wasn't great. That takes courage to be able to do that. And that doesn't just magically happen overnight. We need to really work at it, but it's worth it. The more effort that we invest in our own professional development and building our own networks, whether that's your brilliant community that you have with Raising the Tide, or whether it's people inside your organization who can support you and give you a safe space to try things out. I think very often when we lose that courage or lose that confidence, it's because we're in such visible roles where everything you say, everything you write, everything you advise can be scrutinized. And it often is. And that brings with it some vulnerability, I think.
Oh, 100%. You have to be vulnerable in this role. One of the things I share with comms leaders is it's not enough to just say, I'm not an order taker, or to exude that kind of attitude, right? You have to show them what you know. These are the things I know about your business area goals. These are the things that I know that we're trying to accomplish. These are the questions I have based on my knowledge where there's gaps, so that you're showing them I'm paying attention. I understand where we're trying to head, but there's still some things that we need to work out so that I can partner with you to help advance the goals, because our goals are the same, to help this business succeed, this organization succeed.
Absolutely. I wrote in the book about we're not a support function. We are a business function because we enable the business to function. You have to be really bedded into the business. I wrote quite a few times in the book about confidence and particularly waiting for permission. And I found myself as I was writing it thinking, if you're waiting for permission, this is it. And I wrote that at least 2 or 3 times as I was writing through the book, because we kind of wait for that. What are we waiting for? You need to give yourself the permission to really own the role that you're doing and use your skills, your knowledge and experience to benefit your organization and benefit your people. So there is something there for me about giving yourself permission to show up and to be professional. And that has to start from you. It has to come from within.
That leads me to something that I saw, I think, a newsletter you put out. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I saw it. And so I'm going to ask you about it. One of the things you asked a crowd recently at an event where you were speaking was, what's preventing you from getting started on your comms strategy? I'm curious because that's actually something that I see quite a bit. People waiting to get their comm strategy going for one reason or another. Often it's something like, we don't have a business strategy, so I'm waiting for the business strategy to get started on my comm strategy, or I don't know where to start, or I'm not sure I know enough to get started or where to start. So I'm curious about what you've seen, what you've heard, and what advice you have for people who maybe don't have an internal comm strategy.
Let me grab those stats for you. So that was today. I wrote a LinkedIn newsletter about creating an internal communication strategy that you love. So it was based on a talk that I gave recently at the Institute of Internal Communication Festival here in the UK. So this was a brilliant room of 300 in-house internal communicators and a sprinkling of consultants as well. And it was such an amazing atmosphere and such a beautiful experience to have as an internal communicator. And I did a poll during my talk and I asked people, how do you feel about writing an internal communication strategy? And I gave 3 choices. I'm confident and I know what to write. I'm okay, but something's holding me back. Or I'm confused and I have no idea what to write. And the stats showed 19% of people said, I'm confident and I know what to write. In a room of internal communicators, okay, but something is holding me back was 47%. So nearly half the room told me that I feel okay about writing an internal comm strategy, but there's something holding me back. And then 32% said, I'm confused and I have no idea what to write. And then I asked them to rank their internal comm strategy, if they've got one, from 1 to 5 stars. And 43% of the room said they had 3 stars. So we were kind of in the middle. And one person said they had 5 stars. And I later found out that was a client in the room from Mars Wrigley, who we'd helped write her strategy. So I was pleased about that. So what that showed me was there's a real hesitancy there around something's holding us back as internal communicators. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to I've got a framework called the Miller Framework, which I wanted to use as the basis of the book, because I've been writing internal comm strategies for years. And I think there's a real logical sequence and a flow to writing them. So the framework I've developed helps guide people through. So it's your mindsets, insights, logistics, leadership, evaluation, and I do mean measurement there. and revision.
Mhm.
And those are the stages that, if you follow that logical flow, you can write an internal comm strategy. So what's holding you back is, I don't know what to put in it. I don't know what to start. I don't know where to start. And I also addressed in the book, what if you're not the most senior person?
Mm.
What if you don't have a business strategy in place? What if you're waiting for these magical things to happen or this permission to happen? And my advice is just to get started.
Mm.
If your boss is the person who probably should be writing the strategy, I wrote about that and said, have a conversation with them, because they could be doing something already. But I also asked that room of people at the IOIC festival, how many people have avoided applying for a job or a promotion because there was a line on the job description that said, you will be responsible for writing an internal comm strategy. And there were so many people in that room and over the course of that conference who came to see me and said, oh my goodness, that's me. I've taken myself out of career opportunities because they've seen a line in a job description that says, you need to write an internal comm strategy.
I bet that most of them are women, because there are studies that show that women take themselves out of these job opportunities more often than men. Men need a certain percentage of skills in order to apply for a job, and women need to have all of them in order to apply for a job. This is where I talk about the intersection of gender and our misunderstood and oversimplified field.
It was women who had that conversation with me. That's fair. It was women who came to find me during the course of the conference and had that conversation with me. I think it goes back to the visibility part, that the nervousness around, I'm going to be scrutinized, I'm going to be judged on this. Is it going to be good enough? And I think it goes back to our conversation about, you are the expert. You are the professional communicator, or one of many, but this is your field. This is your niche. You know how to do this. And if you're not sure how to do it, there are so many of us offering advice and guidance to support you.
So for me, one of the big things I start with also is mindset. And that's the concept of, like, you are the expert, you are that knowledge bearer. But I also give them a framework for the things, the barriers, the blockers that come up of, we don't have a strategy. I don't know what my role is. They expect this of me. I expect that of me. It's about owning that and reshaping it and claiming what your role is, because you should be able to tell them what your job is. They don't know what they don't know. So you get to tell them how they should be treating you as the business advisor that you are. We start there in working with the leadership team and talking with them about their goals and how the comms team is going to partner with them. So similar approach, I think, in terms of starting from, like, if people say, I don't know where to start from, that's why I think they need people like you and me. And in addition to that, having a third party in the room can do so much. And if it's done well, like, you don't want someone in the room, whether it's me, Rachel, or someone else, who's going to reflect all of the attention and new approach onto themselves. It's about shining the light back on you so that you are seen as the leader that you are, and being able to reclaim that. So we're your partner staff and you are their partner.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's not great when you have a consultant come in and it feels like the success relies wholly on them. And then when they leave, what happens next? I couldn't agree more with you. And I think I spent 10 years in the house, and I remember how frustrating it was to have consultants have to bring people in more often than not to say what you've already been saying, but because they're a third party, because they're independent, for some reason your organization listens to them. So I agree with you. I think the way that I work, and I'm sure the way you work, is in partnership with people. So setting you up for success so you can thrive without me. So the success is, I'm amplifying the brilliant work that's happening inside the organization and making sure that a comms team can thrive when we're not there anymore, when my team and I aren't there anymore. Super.
Yes. Both of us being in-house and both of us being external, I think we've seen how it works and how it doesn't work. And so we're able to kind of set up our clients for success. But enough on that. I would also say that, though, one of the big benefits of bringing in a third party, I would argue, instead of doing it all yourself, is that you can't see the label from inside the jar. So having someone else to bounce ideas off of, to see things that you're not seeing, to challenge you on the metrics, that scary word we talked about earlier, the measurement.
Yeah.
Those are even that, and how you're leveraging your team, how you're deploying them, are all so valuable to making your comm strategy successful. Okay, well, we have covered a lot here, but there is more to talk about. So we will be back with Rachel Miller in just a moment after this word. The Communications Business Advisor podcast is brought to you by Raise the Tide, the program for women communications leaders and emerging leaders working in the corporate environment. Raise the Tide is part community, part coaching, part professional development, and part mentorship. The program advances women in their careers and activates these trailblazers to advance our vision of a corporate world that not only invites communications leaders to act as critical advisors, but expects them to. A rising tide raises all ships, but we're not the ships. Together, we're the force of the tide raising the ships for our entire industry. For more information, visit www.raisethetide.net. And we are back with Rachel Miller. Tell me what's on your mind these days. I'm shifting here. We've talked a lot about strategy. What's on your mind today? What are you seeing from comms in terms of what we really need to wrestle with and wrangle in order to be elevated as that senior advisor and partner that we are?
Lots of conversations that I'm having at the moment with clients and comms friends are around helping businesses make good decisions around two areas in particular, around leadership communication during change. That seems to be a constant conversation, particularly equipping people managers to be able to deliver very difficult news, to help them learn how to do that remotely if their teams are working remotely. I did quite a lot of that during COVID, and it feels like that's come round again. And having lots of conversations about working with people managers and making sure that they're equipped, and also AI. And we've done really well to get this far into conversation and not talk about AI.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of comms teams contacting my team and I and saying, what are other people doing? What should we be doing? Who's doing what? How do we get ahead? Are we behind? What should we be advising our organization? Because back to that visibility point, it feels like internal communicators are being looked to help create roadmaps inside their organizations when it comes to AI. And the mindset for me always is creating flexibility within boundaries, but the boundaries need to be set. And that's not just a comms thing. That should be a multidisciplinary conversation inside your organization. It should be allied fields like HR and IT. And having those conversations, very often we are the conduit, we are that glue or golden thread inside the organization. And it feels like internal communicators who are known for doing that and binding the organization to itself are being pulled in for these knotty problems like AI in terms of what do we do with this? Because you are that central person where you've got the relationships. So I'm having lots of conversations like that at the moment with clients and comms friends where they're saying, oh my goodness, I'm being put under pressure. What should I do?
It feels a little bit like AI and guardrails or a roadmap of do's and don'ts, an approach for organizations is similar to what we were going through 15-ish, I don't know, I'm dating myself here, years ago with social media, where it was,
Absolutely.
What should employees do? How do we want them to act? And at first it was, no action, no interaction, no comments. And then it was, how do we train them to become brand ambassadors? What are the rules, the guidelines, the policies? And it feels like AI is the new that. I don't mean to make AI seem smaller than it is, because I think it's massive. It's, somewhere between the invention of social media and the invention of the web.
You're right. It's, when we were having conversations about enterprise social networks, it was exactly the same. And 10, 15 years before that, it was everyone's got a mobile. They're going to be calling their family abroad. There's always something. I call it the comms bling, the latest, shiniest thing, the blingy thing that will turn our heads. And we're in that situation right now. So always my recommendation is to pause, reflect, analyze, apply what you know about your business, apply what you know about the policies and procedures you've got in place inside your organization already, and then being really mindful of where are the gaps. So do we need to give some guardrails around not putting proprietary information into Chat GPT? Probably, but our people, they are adults, but we need to have some guidance in place inside our organizations to help our people know what those boundaries are.
Rachel, that's smart and something I didn't think to cover. So thanks for sharing that. I think we're headed to the end of our time. I'd love to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to share with our listeners, the internal communications, brilliant advisors out there, as they think about this coming year or the remainder of this year and next year. What guidance do you have for them? What advice, what tips, what one key takeaway that you would want them to take from this conversation today?
I would encourage people, if you have plans in place or you have an internal communication strategy in place, it's only useful if it's up to date. So if you were listening to our conversation about strategies and you think, I've got one somewhere, or it's a bit dusty, I need to dust it off, it's a really important document to be able to have to hand, to be able to demonstrate your value, demonstrate your worth, make good decisions in terms of what you're prioritizing inside your organization. So my recommendation is at least every 3 months, you need to be looking at that strategy and making sure it still fits the organization. If your business priorities have changed, if your business goals have changed, then your internal communication strategy will need to reflect it. It needs to be mirroring the language of the business. So top tip from me is, if you have invested time, money, and effort in creating a brilliant plan or an excellent internal comms strategy, make sure it's still working hard enough for you by checking in, dusting it off, and make sure you're pulling it through into your daily actions as an individual or as a team.
Do not let it sit on a shelf. I think if I could clap in between each word, I would. I agree with you entirely, Rachel. It's always a pleasure every time I get the opportunity to talk with you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with our listeners today. And we'll put in some show notes, the access to Rachel's book, and how you can continue to connect with her on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. A pleasure to join you.
If you're interested in working with me to advance your work and your team's reputation as critical business advisors, never order takers, check out taramcdonagh.com. Thanks for listening to the Communications Business Advisor podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a rating or a review. It helps people find us, and we can't ignite a movement without sharing the message. See you next time, where we'll continue to do the work to elevate our field's reputation and elevate the careers of the people in it.